In the realm of animal behavior, for example, it leads to quite striking predictions. If rats learn a new trick here in London, then rats all around the world should be able to learn the same trick quicker, just because the rats have learned it here. The more that learn it, the easier it should get everywhere else. And there's already evidence that this actually happens from studies of rats in laboratories. When lots of rats have learned something, other rats all around the world find it easier to learn.
In today's video, I'm going to be talking about Rupert Sheldrake's morphic resonance theory. This theory suggests that everything in our reality has a field of information or intelligence which has a memory and affects other similar entities. Lately, I've been going in-depth into the realm of quantum physics, mainly going with the idea of explaining what many believe to be or call a quantum field of consciousness, a quantum field, or a field of consciousness. This idea that everything is connected by a non-material or quote-unquote metaphysical force or field of intelligence, which our ancient philosophies have understood with names such as ki or quote-unquote spirit. We are speaking about this immutable intelligence behind every form in the universe, resemblant to Plato's theory of forms. Morphic resonance is but one way to explain what scientists haven't been able to understand. What exactly is the intelligence behind forms, behind matter? With this theory and the ones that I've been cataloging in this channel, along with the ones that are coming in the future, my goal is to produce a scientific framework to understand the concept of quote-unquote soul more as a reality rather than a vague esoteric concept. This new concept of soul will be based on ideas like Einstein's understanding of looking at matter as energy within fields, with a particular focus on what's the intelligence behind such things. Before I move forward, I would like to remind you that if you want to join the growing discussion on consciousness and would like to be notified on the latest scientific discoveries and theories surrounding this topic and how they connect to ancient mythologies and philosophies, please like the video, subscribe to the channel, as I'll try to upload at least one video per week as I continue with the outline. Alright, so as mentioned, in today's video I'm going to be going into a brief introduction to morphic fields, this theory by Rupert Sheldrake. So for this video I wanted to talk about quantum telepathy, or what is called technically pseudo-telepathy, not because it's pseudo, not because it's woo, or because it's nonsense. It's a technical term that it has, and I'm going to go into it when it's time to go into it. But I also wanted to go into something that I've mentioned before in some of the videos that I've been making on quantum physics, and which is this telepathy which people report in altered states of consciousness, whether through near-death experiences, abduction cases, psychedelic, where they communicate with these quote-unquote entities or beings, or what, as I said, they call them aliens, they call them angels, they call them different names to understand the same thing. And we have some research recently that is showing that this quote-unquote pseudo-telepathy is a real thing. Of course, people are mocking, people are ridiculing everything, but this research is still coming forward and forward and forward. I wanted to make a little bit of a change of pace because I've been talking about quantum physics in the last 2 months, and we had this big announcement with 2022 Nobel Prize in Physics, where entanglement was confirmed to be a real thing, a real weird thing in the universe. I'm gonna link that somewhere in the screen. This is a huge thing. It's one of the biggest announcements in quantum physics in the last maybe 20 years. However, the reason why I've been going into quantum physics is because I've been wanting to explain this idea of what it is called sometimes the quantum field of consciousness, or the field of consciousness, or the quantum field, or so on and so forth. This idea that there's a field around us or everywhere, or we are in the field. And this is how our souls, our consciousness, our minds work. And now we have different ways to start to understand this. One of these ways is Rupert Sheldrake's morphic fields. There's some more research that I'm going to be going into in electromagnetic fields. There's research on bioluminescence, and how they're saying that we are literally made of light, and we are literally having photons within us acting up. And all of those theories I'm going to go into, because all of them tie together to try to explain who we are, what we are as human beings. And we're trying to make that connection between science, the framework that science is providing, with the reports from altered states of consciousness. All right, so a little bit about Rupert Sheldrake and his theory. This was written in 2020. Chad Woodford. This is on Medium. This is more like a mainstream blog with where all these paranormal things are. I made some videos about some other articles here having to do with psychedelic experiences and alien phenomenon and so on and so forth. This is nothing scientific. Sometimes there's science involved in it. This video is going to go on pragmatic philosophy because the theory of morphic fields is a theory. It is not a scientific proposition. It is scientific, but there is no actual research, no experiments done on this. This is more like an understanding. However, some of the things that I'm going to mention throughout the article are going to lead to some other theories which do have published research, which do have articles on them, and I'm gonna share the link to the videos. You don't have to watch my video, you can go straight to the description and you will find the articles and the actual published research in all of the videos on the playlist Ongoing Research in this channel. Alright, so in this post I'm going to summarize the theory of morphic fields. Rupert Sheldrake, the book is Presence of the Past, and it so nicely ties together a few loose ends in modern science, like where the mind can be located and how genes work. We don't know where all of this. I keep making the same argument over and over and over. The big problem of qualia. Where is the mind? Where exactly? We open the brain. We don't see a mental image. So where is this mental image? I talked about a metaphysical place of existence where all of this is. There are different theories. Rupert Sheldrake's idea is this of morphic resonance. Now, just as a basic introduction to why morphic resonance exists, why some of these theories are coming together, is because as we go and delve into the research on quantum physics, the main thing about quantum physics, the main problem is that scientists do not know what intelligence is behind forms, behind matter, what creates a tree and what creates a butterfly and what creates a human hand. What is the intelligence behind all of this? And we go into the argument of intelligent design. Where does all of this come from? So when they were looking at what exactly was light, what is light? Is light solid? Is light a wave? What's going on with the whole thing of light? They realized that light is what we want it to be whenever we want it to be. When you look at it, it becomes a thing. When you don't look at it, it's a wave. So what exactly is the intelligence? This is why I've been going on and on and on in quantum physics, saying why do these particles choose? Who is choosing? What is choosing? So then you add all of these theories that consciousness is behind all of this. But what exactly is consciousness? Is it a field? Is it an intelligence? Is it us? Does it come from outside? We are delving into all of these theories, and with some of the theories that I'm going to be posting in the future, everything is coming together. So like he says here, is tying these loose ends in modern science, and he goes on to say, while simultaneously embodying the cosmology and wisdom of ancient yoga. Now he's calling ancient yoga, and he talks about some of the yoga traditions and some of the ideas. Basically, instead of ancient yoga, it's just Eastern philosophy as a whole, as a perennial idea. He talks about some of these things below. But when you talk about Eastern philosophy as well, it's very easily tied to most ancient traditions, to most ancient ideas. As I said, what some people were calling the Bill of Maya, this all-encompassing illusion, this all-encompassing thing, can be very well assimilated to the idea of a spirit which is everywhere, which goes through mountains and so on and so forth. This spirit that is everywhere and all around, and it's always with us until the day before we exist and after we exist. So all these ancient ideas start translating into what seems to be some sort of a grid, some sort of a network that encompasses all of our reality. Alright, so very quickly, who is Rupert Sheldrake? What is some of his criticism, what he's done? So Rupert Sheldrake is a courageous and iconoclastic scientist among rare few whose TED Talks have been banned. He's been very vocal against the scientific dogma, which is something that I've talked about in the past. We have a scientific dogma currently. This abstract idea of science, and to which I question, science by whom? We have a lot of scientists talking about the weird things, the strange things. Einstein was proved wrong 7 years ago, and just in this year, whoever proved him wrong got the Nobel Prize in physics. So whose science is real? It's not about science as an abstract. There's science for everything. So what is real? This is what we're trying to find out. So he says he's the perfect champion for evangelizing this theory. His mission is truly scientific. So Rupert Sheldrake is both a scientist and a philosopher. A lot of people just take him as just a weird philosopher, a strange guy with a strange theory. He is both a scientist and a philosopher. His mission is truly scientific. The search for truth rather than what seems to be the goal of most scientists today, to preserve the existing understanding of reality, the current status quo. And this is because of two things. Number one, fear of the unknown, fear that something is going to break their whole idea of reality. Number two, fear of losing their reputation. If somebody dares to pose a strange theory, something that does not conform the traditional idea of reality, then everything is gone, and they're classified as crazy people, as woo, and so on and so forth. But as I said, in the last 5, 10, 15 years, we've had all this research and all of these scientists coming forward because they are looking for truth, not to retain the current status quo. And now the author goes on to say something that I really agree with. I feel strongly that a lack of a holistic and meaningful cosmology is one of the root causes of all of our challenges as a humanity. Today, I 100% agree with this. If we had a better understanding of our current cosmology, some of the issues would vanish. Some of the issues in science would vanish. As I said, if when we talk about this quantum pseudo-telepathy, which I'm going to be talking in the future, we're talking about in the future with actual research, when scientists look at these things, they just think about, oh, this is just something weird that is happening, and it's going to help us develop better ways to communicate to each other. But now, if these scientists were aware of all of the bulk of the data of all the states of consciousness, of all these, as in that scientific consensus statements for the future research of NDE suggest hundreds of millions of reports saying the same thing. I'm going to link it somewhere in the screen. I made a video about this. Only in this year, scientists are coming forward, experts on the medical field are coming forward and taking these things seriously, because there's just so much data. With the internet, with social media, all of these stories, all of the reports are coming forward, are being shared, and the similarities between them are starting to be seriously studied by science. This is something that this channel is going to be focusing on. However, at the moment, I'm not sure how I'm going to integrate that holistic idea. And this is going to be one of the goals of this channel, to integrate the science with this holistic view of the reports of all the states of consciousness. So real quick, if you go to the wiki on Rupert Sheldrake, we're going to see a little bit of his criticism, a little bit of his credentials. Morphic resonance. He worked as a biochemist at Cambridge University from 67 to 73, and as principal plant physiologist at the International Crops Research Institute for Semi-Arid Tropics in India until 1978. So he's got some credentials. Memory is inherent in nature, and that natural systems inherit a collective memory from all previous things of their kind. Sheldrake proposes that it is also responsible for telepathy-type interconnections between organisms. What is quantum entanglement? What does quantum entanglement suggest? Everything is made of particles. Everything is made of particles at the quantum level which interact with each other. What exactly is the intelligence that forms this plant, or that forms a snowflake? We don't know. We don't know what the intelligence behind this is. So this is why we have these theories coming forward: morphic resonance, electromagnetic fields, auras, souls, quantum field of consciousness. What is the intelligence behind all of that? Scientists don't know. We don't know what's the intelligence behind that. So this telepathy type interconnection is what quantum entanglement is suggesting. Now, when we think about quantum entanglement, we think about the experiment of a photon. A photon is the spin on a horizontal axis or a vertical axis, but that's not quantum entanglement. This is a principle. This is a way to prove the principle. In reality, in the world at large, everything is connected. Everything is entangled in a way. if we think about it, if we want to look at it like that. If they're saying that the universe is not local, as I said, I'm going to link the video somewhere on the screen. You can find everything below if you miss the link or whatever. All the related videos I'm going to be attached, and everything has published research underneath in the description. If the whole universe is non-local, it means that everything is connected. As the thousands and perhaps millions, as they're saying in that report from NDS, millions of people are saying the same thing. Millions of people are being communicated the same thing. Everything is connected. There's no distance. There's only one. All is mind, according to the first rule of mentalism in the Kybalion. Rupert Sheldrake is talking about development, inheritance, and memory. What is memory? I made a bit about this before. So morphic resonance is not accepted by the scientific community, and Sheldrake's proposals relating to it have been widely criticized. Critics cite a lack of evidence for morphic resonance and inconsistencies between its tenets and data from genetics, embryology, neuroscience, and biochemistry. They also express concern that popular attention paid to Sheldrake's books and public appearances undermines the public's understanding of science. They're afraid that it undermines the public's understanding of science. So what are we gonna do? What did people do 400 years ago? They would put people like Rupert Sheldrake on a bonfire. They would crucify them. 2000 years ago, they would crucify them. Anybody who is not with the status quo, they would exile them. Are we supposed to do this? Is this searching for truth? It's not. Prove him wrong. Create the science to prove him wrong 100%. Put it out, have people look at it, have people understand it, and then that's how you eliminate Rupert Sheldrake if he is such a big concern for you, for people undermining your stuff. Don't be like a priest. This is like religion. This is like religion, like a priest saying, no, you're wrong, so we're gonna exile you. I don't understand this, and there is a scientific dogma, and it needs to stop. Of course, other work by Sheldrake encompasses paranormal subjects such as precognition, empirical research into telepathy. This is what I'm going to be talking about. And this telepathy, as I said, it ties to the alien phenomenon, it ties to the UFO phenomenon, to channeling, and so on and so forth. And the psychic stirring effect is something that he talks about. I go into it. He has been described as a new age author, of course. We're only talking about a woo here. So let's go into the actual theory. All right, so in this article, I'm going to be skipping a lot of it because this is a very well written article. But some of the things we already know. A lot of the people who follow this channel, they already know these things. So it's like preaching to the choir. But if you're not really familiar with all these things, I would really suggest to read this article because it ties into immutable and eternal and so on and so forth. It's very well proposed. But I'm just going to go to the specifics of the theory here. So one of the things about the theory, one of the things that I like about Rupert Sheldrake, that Sheldrake suggests that perhaps these laws of nature are simply habits of nature that have developed gradually over long periods of time, so as to seem like immutable laws. So this is one of the things that in quantum physics these scientists are looking at, and this is why they were baffled, because the idea is that there are these very rigid laws about the universe, about matter, about things, about everything. Our Rupert Sheldrake is suggesting that it is not as solid as we think. Things have been evolving and things change depending on behavior, depending on different things, and this ties to free will. Where is the future of humans? How are humans going to evolve in the future? Is there something predetermined? This intelligence, this intelligent design has everything, literally everything in it, or do we have any say in it? So as he says, these habits of nature, these things have been evolving instead of there being some rigid laws, which we need to find out, and they have to be the law, and there's nothing else that can. This is the idea of science, that there are these natural laws that are immutable. However, what research is suggesting is that everything can change, and the funny thing is that it changes with consciousness. It changes as we look at it, and it's a little bit more flexible or more malleable. As I said, this ties straight into the concept of free will, it ties into the concept of consensus reality, that we decide to create one reality. So you go into the reports of altered states of consciousness. William Boltzmann is one of the ones who are proposing this idea of consensus reality, that there are these different worlds of existence, these different realms of existence, and what creates this consensus reality is the collective, is all of the beings that exist within that reality, which creates such consensus reality. And what creates it is its consciousness through free will. So as we evolve on planet Earth, we are some sort of a collective consciousness, which is creating all of these things and which is evolving. So it's not as immutable, it's not as rigid as the laws, so it's always evolving. This is one of the main features of morphic resonance. Everything is evolving. So what exactly is? It's all about fields. It's the morphic field, morphic resonance is the electromagnetic field, and so for the theory of morphic resonance depends on recognition of a new field, like the field of gravity or electromagnetic fields, which are non-material regions of influence. Non-material, to point out here, non-material, which is the same to say non-physical, or quote-unquote metaphysical. If you mention the word metaphysical, it triggers people, it alarms people. But if we say non-material, it's okay, it's fine. So if it said here metaphysical regions of influence, it would trigger people, but non-material doesn't. It's the same thing. We're talking about the same thing. Physicists agree that the gravitational field permeates the entire universe. It's everywhere, curving around all matter within it. So what is everywhere? Omnipresence. According to Albert Einstein, we do not explain fields in terms of matter. Instead, we understand matter in terms of energy within fields. Certainly, it is possible that there are more fields than we have identified to date. Now, I'm going to read this again. According to Albert Einstein, we do not explain fields in terms of matter. Instead, we understand matter in terms of energy within fields. Energy. So E equals mc squared is the transference between energy and matter, which is the same thing. It equals energy equals matter. So it's the same thing. What are we talking about? What is energy? Could energy be a thing, be a physical thing, or could it be a metaphysical thing? So a lot of people are going to say it's a physical thing. It's energy. It's the particles. It's everything. But when you look at it with a potent enough microscope, then it is superposition. It is wave. It doesn't exist. It goes and it flashes, and then it ceases to exist, and then it comes and exists again in another point. This is the superposition. So what are we talking about here? We're talking about we are energy within fields. Now, if you go into the theories of auras, and I'm going to be talking about this in the future in this channel, these concepts of biophotons and how literally humans are made of light, and how there are all these fields that we're not looking at. Some of the research on electromagnetic fields, and now I made a couple of videos on this in the past. One was about looking at magnetoencephalography and how does that even work. The idea that there is this machine which picks up brain activity outside of your skull, not even touching you. So which means that this brain activity literally emanates from your skull into outside of you, into, if you may, a field of influence, a non-material region of influence. This is your brain just putting all that brain activity outside. What is it? What is it? Is it a wave? Is it information? Is it quantum information? Is it memories? Is it the actual thing? What exactly is it? So I made that video. I'm going to link it somewhere in the screen. And I made another one where scientists confirmed that magnetism has an effect in human cells at the quantum level. So you can see that everything is interconnected, and we start talking about quantum biology. So if this magnetism has a quantum effect in cells, in human cells, could it be that the electromagnetic field of all beings have an electromagnetic field? And the scientists are thinking this is how birds or flocks or school of fish or a flock of birds, this is how they communicate with each other, and this is how they travel and how they know where to go because of these electromagnetic fields. Now, could it be that the electromagnetic field created by brain activity could have an effect on other electromagnetic fields from another being, perhaps another human being? And all of this has even quantum effects in cell. Everything is connected. You can see right here, everything is connected. We're talking about these fields, we're talking about this influence. So then when you put all of these things into context, when you think about this connection between electromagnetic fields, between non-material regions of influence, between quantum biology and how it is affected, and if consciousness does in fact, as quantum theory suggests, consciousness affects the results, where it's called the quantum theory is observer dependent in nature. We take all of these things into account, and we take entanglement into account, which has been confirmed in 2015 by the current Nobel Prize winners of 2022. Then what Rupert Sheldrake is saying about telepathy, about precognition, about all these things, perhaps is not so far-fetched. But we're gonna describe him as a quote-unquote new age author. But science is providing the framework for all of this, and we cannot keep denying this. I'm gonna link both of them, the one about magnetoencephalography and the one about how magnetism has an effect on human cells at the quantum level. Another thing that I want to get out of the way here, and it is mentioned further in the article, and it's a mention against it, but I think that, this has been presented to Rupert Sheldrake. Rupert Sheldrake does an argument on this. So it says, non-material regions of influence extending in space and continuing in time. These fields contain a memory for the object or system they organize, a plant, an animal, even an atom, or a snowflake. So this is, as I said, this is the intelligence behind the forms. What creates a thing, what creates a snowflake, and what creates an animal, what creates a cat. What is the intelligence that makes these cells and makes these atoms create a cat or a snowflake? Some people would call it God, some people would call it intelligence, some people would call it different things. Now, the idea of Rupert Sheldrake is that this is called morphic resonance, and this is the intelligence behind all of these things. All of it might be the same thing. What people call God might be morphic resonance, or morphic resonance might have been called by a higher intelligence, by an intelligence that is more accurate to be a part of the universe. It doesn't have to be a God as people understand it, because as soon as you start talking about God, people would tie that up with religion and with other things. We don't have to talk. Let's talk about this higher spirit from Einstein. Einstein believed that there is this higher intelligence, this higher spirit, this transcendental spirit, something of that nature he calls it. And I'm going to link that somewhere on the screen. I made a video about the ideas of Einstein, the more quote-unquote woo ideas of Einstein. I'm going to link it somewhere on the screen. I made a video about that. So whatever you want to call it, this is the intelligence behind all of this. So this reminds me of Plato's theory of forms, where Plato, and this is, when we think about Plato's theory of forms, this is thousands of years ago, before even religion existed as we know it, as Christianity or as our organized religion as we conceive it right now. Before any of that, Plato had this idea that there was a perfect tree, there was a perfect realm of forms, if you may, a metaphysical realm where everything comes from, and all of the research, all of the reports, all of the communication in altered states of consciousness leads towards this idea of this metaphysical realm of existence. So this is something of that nature, but in the ideas of Plato is this metaphysical space which is eternal. In the ideas of Rupert Sheldrake, and Rupert Sheldrake makes the argument, he thinks more as one of the disciples of Plato, of Aristotle, and how this idea has to do with evolution. And he mentions that evolution was not a concept back in Greek philosophy, as at least not as we understand it right now, but he's talking about morphic resonance in terms of evolution. Now, these are technical terms, these are different ideas of conceiving things. As I said, morphic resonance itself it's simply a different way to understand what seems to be happening, and it's mainly this idea that there is this larger field of consciousness which encompasses everything, which contains all the intelligence in the universe, and it's part of that non-material, this metaphysical realm of existence where everything comes from, everything physical comes from. You can find it in ancient religions as the flesh and the spirit. There are different ways to put it. I cannot think of all of them right now, but it's the same thing. We're talking about the same thing. Let's not get lost in the terms. We're talking about the same thing here. The article actually goes into it. I kind of get ahead of it. So Sheldrake and others suggest that morphogenetic fields are as real as gravitational, electromagnetic, and quantum matter fields. This is interesting. What exactly is a quantum matter fields, or is electromagnetic, or is gravitational, and that every cell, organ, and organism has its own field in a nested hierarchy of fields which shape and organize all life forms. Recall that Sheldrake calls this theory formative causation. Now, he talks also about phantom limbs, and that's a very interesting idea. What exactly is this phantom limb? Is it in the brain, or is it somewhere else, or is it in both? So this idea that everything, even when you think about regeneration, how does the body regenerate itself? It has this information, and if you would ask Rupert Sheldrake, he would tell you that it is this morphic field of whatever you lost which generates the thing again. Now, a human cannot grow a limb, but a lizard can grow its tail back. Things of that nature. What creates this form of a lizard? And he argues that it is this morphogenetic field. It's quite interesting because when we think about organs, when we think about things, there are things that do regenerate. When we think about bone creation, when we think about what is this intelligence that creates your bones, and if you break a bone, what is this intelligence that puts it back together? We don't know. So we have this theory of morphic fields. All matter is simply a material manifestation of the broader morphic field. So a rose is a manifestation of the rose field. So the concept of a rose, I go back to this idea of Plato, even though Rupert Sheldrake does not agree with this. I think it's sort of the same thing. It's the concept, the metaphysical concept of a rose. If we want to call it a rose field, let's call it a rose field then. A person, a single manifestation of the human field. Like Einstein suggested, matter appears to be simply an emergent property of these larger fields that permeate both space and time. So we have these larger fields. We call them fields. We call them morphogenetic fields. We call them electromagnetic fields. We call them quantum fields. They permeate both space and time. They encompass everything. If they encompass space and time, they encompass the whole universe, and the whole universe has been proven to be interconnected because of entanglement. There's non-locality. We're living in the mind of Ahura Mazda. We're living in the mind of the One, if you may. Everything is interconnected. Now, somewhere in this very article, they're calling these fields non-material, which is the same to say metaphysical. And now, even Einstein believed that matter is an emergent property of these larger fields. And if the fields are metaphysical, then matter is emergent of the metaphysical. And if matter is energy, it can be correlated with energy. It's the same, E equals mc squared. What are we talking about here? We're looking at the same thing. This is the elephant. We're looking at the elephant. I had to bring this up because maybe some people do not know this allegory or whatever is called of the elephant. So we're calling them non-material fields, we're calling them electromagnetic field, we're calling them quantum field, we're calling them non-material, which is the same to say metaphysical. So Rupert Sheldrake calls it morphic resonance, and Einstein calls it a different thing. And then we have other people calling it a different thing. All of us are blind. Everybody is blind, and we're looking at the same thing. It's the elephants, but everyone is touching a different part of the elephant. So this one thinks it's a rope, this one thinks that the trunk is a snake, this one thinks it's a wall, but we're looking at the same thing through different filters. It's the same thing we're talking about here. Alright, morphic resonance and repeatability. So, if morphic fields and morphic resonance explain the inheritance of learned behavior and seeming non-local transmission of new behaviors almost instantaneously around the world, then we should be able to test this. At least one phenomenon appears to bear this out. So, we're going to go into a bit of the examples of morphic resonance, but I find the little paragraph really interesting. Inheritance of learned behavior seeming non-local transmission of new behaviors instantaneously. Now, this was, as I said, this was written in 2020. It's right here, 2020. And 2022, we have the Nobel Prize in Physics, where it states that the universe is non-local. So this trigger word, non-local, is forever going to be in the future of whenever we're talking about quantum, when we're talking about the universe. This idea of non-locality, as it's been proven in the last research, which was conducted in 2015. I have a link on my previous video to that. I'm going to link it somewhere, as I said, or you can find it below. The idea is the universe is not local, and my argument right there was, why is it faster than light? Because there is no distance. There is no distance between things. This entanglement of the particles is instant because there's no distance with it, and this is what they're saying here, seeming non-local transmission of new behaviors. But now we're not talking about a photon which is vertical and the entangled one is horizontal. We're talking about behaviors, because in the concept, in the idea of morphic resonance, a type of bird is entangled with the whole species of bird through this morphic resonance, through this, you call it a larger soul, a larger mold, if you may, something of that nature. Everything is connected, so almost instantaneously around the world, this transmission of behavior, then we should be able to test it. So it goes into a couple of examples here. Newly synthesized chemical compounds are at first difficult to crystallize. It can take weeks or months for crystals to appear in a supersaturated solution. But once a new synthesized compound is crystallized, crystals appear more easily in laboratories across the world. Why does this happen? So once it is crystallized for the first time, then it becomes easier anywhere in the world. Like if they shared this memory across the world, across everything, as everything was connected and all these new crystals, and then once it's been done somewhere, the memory transfers, even though they're not connected. But as we said, even if it's in one end of the cosmos and another end of the cosmos, the universe, if the entanglement is real, the change is instant. So this has been done as it goes, as Rupert Sheldrake says. There's some research on rats, there's some research on species of birds, and so on and so forth. So it says here, until formative causation is another way to call a morphic resonance, was proposed as an explanation. The prevailing materialist explanation for this was that roving male chemists with birds were inadvertently carrying seed crystals in their birds from side to side. How entertaining and creative the absurd lens that materialists will go to explain unexplained phenomena to avoid considering a new theory. This is what Chad Woodford is saying here. Although this attempt to seek out materialist explanations is worthy instinct in science, it should stop short of the fantastical or the farcical. Now he's calling them out. So they're saying that they're taking these seeds of crystals in their birds. This is how as they travel around the world in different laboratories, it's easier for the phenomenon to happen. Well, how do you explain birds then? Scientists have also conducted experiments with varying degrees of success, setting out to prove that a new learned behavior in a species of bird in one part of the world can be transmitted non-locally to, for example, birds halfway around the world. You can read more about these experiments in Sheldrake's books. So you can go into Sheldrake's books, you can go into the research. If I find this research, I'm gonna go in the future in this research, most likely, because there's some ideas with another idea that comes to my mind right now is that when they find the cure for something, there's a scientific breakthrough somewhere in the world, somewhere else, people start finding the same results. Perhaps this is what happened with the Nobel Prize. when aspects started looking into it, or were closer started looking into it, some of the other scientists started looking into it on their own pace, on their own end of the world, and things started to happen. So there's this, as Carl Jung would call it, this collective subconscious mind that is somehow interconnected. So now going back into the scientific dogma, how materialists would come up with saying with strange theories to things, it reminds me of another example of how science just explains things in a very random way. How did Cro-Magnon, the species of humans that we are, evolved in the first place? How do we go from monkey to Da Vinci to Plato, thinking about the theory of forms? How do we make this leap of consciousness, of intelligence, of everything? Now, there's a lot of theories, but the prevailing theory in science is because humans started to cook meat. So they cooked meat, and now suddenly we go from monkey to Da Vinci, we go from monkey to Plato, because we cooked meat. These types of conclusions need to be, at the very least, I mean, he says things that it should be called out, at the very least, revised. We have so many theories now on how that leap happened, and it has to do with Jung DNA, as it is called, and I'm gonna be going into that in the future. Again, I went a little bit ahead on the article mentioning Carl Jung, but it is actually mentioned in this article. All of these things are just blatantly obvious when you read the bulk of theories, the bulk of reports. Everything makes absolute sense, but in any case, they do talk about Carl Jung here. Formative causation, morphic fields theory resonates deeply with Carl Jung's concept of the collective unconscious, a global or universally shared pool or field of unconscious archetypes that is comprised of all prior thought and experience from the history of humanity. In fact, the two theories go hand in hand. Jung's idea of the collective unconscious did not make sense in the context of the mechanistic theory of life. Consequently, it was not taken seriously within orthodox science. As I say, the work of Carl Jung was what first led me to do the shift between, because I used to study a lot of political theory, and then when I started to study Carl Jung, that's when I realized that it goes beyond politics. There's something else going on in the world, in the way that humans behave, and the work of Carl Jung will gain relevance as these theories and this science evolve, because Carl Jung had a very, very good idea of what is actually going on here. So of course his ideas were completely refuted by science. He was deemed as crazy, and he had a little bit of mysticism surrounding him, but it seems more plausible for this collective unconscious to be maintained by fields than passed down through some kind of biological encoding in the brain. Do you see how beautiful and elegant this theory is? So now the one way that I can think about this in terms of Carl Jung's examples and ideas is, so the concept, what science tells us is that perhaps that even genetics transfer some of the thoughts from our previous ancestors. So there's this idea that if one of your ancestors had a fear of crickets, let's say, or snakes or whatever, because your ancient ancestors had an encounter with a snake and somebody died or something of that nature, and then it goes through generations, and now you have an irrational fear of snakes. It's because it was passed on through your genes. So now in the work of Carl Jung, he saw some of these archetypes in dreams. So for example, we can think about ancient gods and goddesses of fertility, or gods and goddesses of crops, and sort of the deities that these ancient cultures had. So now you can find that it exists in Celtic traditions, and they have the same sort of dreams, the same sort of mythologies as some traditions, perhaps in Native American cultures or African cultures, where there's not really a biological genetic encoding which was transferred, but rather a collective subconscious mind. So how was this information happening all throughout the ancient cultures? So the idea of everything being some sort of a field of information in this case would make more sense than biological encoding. Now, I made this argument as well in terms of the school of fish. So they realized that the fish which make schools of fish have this have a specific gene in them, so have a specific encoding on their genome. But now my argument is, how is it that when a school of fish is moving around, some sort of an obstruction comes in, and let's say a human being with a scuba diving suit and just gets close to the school of fish and starts taking pictures, and then it encroaches into the school of fish, and one of the fish moves, the rest of the fish move at the same time. Does the biological encoding explains this? Or could it be that there's some field of connectedness throughout the school of fish, which makes it so that when one fish moves for an obstacle or anything, all of the fish move at the same time, instantly, like if they were non-local, like if they were entangled, like if everything was part of the same hive mind at the time where they come together. And this could only be explained in terms of field. Now you can think about the morphogenetic field, as Rupert Sheldrake is calling it. You can think about an electromagnetic field, you can call it a field of consciousness, you can call it what you want. It seems to be that there's this larger field where everything is connected, and it makes absolute sense. Alright, so as I said, the author here makes these parallels with ancient yogic, what he calls ancient yogic worldview, but as I said, this can be just translated as Eastern philosophy or perennial philosophy or ancient philosophy as a whole. If we think about it, we're talking about the same thing. So it says, all of matter and life is self-organizing from the level of the galaxy all the way down to the cells of organisms, and morphic resonance is one way. This is what I've been saying. It's a different way to understand. It's one way to describe the kind of memory field that would be necessary to enable such organization through time. It should be uncontroversial to say that nature is permeated at every level by an infinite intelligence. Again, the idea of intelligent design, this infinite intelligence. We don't have to believe in any kind of external God to accept this. So what they're saying here is the concept of time, the concept of evolution to this morphic resonance. And as I said, the idea that we are consistently evolving has to do with free will. And as Rupert Sheldrake mentioned, this comes in the way of the intelligence of what creates forms, what creates a plant, what creates a bee, what creates something, but also in terms of culture, in terms of these other metaphysical aspects of reality, of cultures, of societies, of ideas, as they say. And as I said, they talk about the ideas of Carl Jung and this subconscious mind. So morphic resonance is only but one way to look at this, to look at this infinite intelligence. We have this idea that something permeates everything. So morphic resonance is one way to look at it. Both yoga philosophy and the theory of formative causation, as I said, formative causation is another name for morphic resonance, view the world as a nested series of self-organizing systems, taking more of an Aristotelian view that all of nature is infused with intelligence. Life and an immanent animating force, rather than there being some god or platonic realm of forms or laws driving matter from the outside. As I said, he's talking about Plato's theory of forms, he's talking about gods, talking about all these things. Morphic resonance works especially well with the classical tantric view that everything is made of consciousness, that all of manifest reality is a cosmic unity known as the heart of the being. So now he's making make the difference between, as I said, morphic resonance to me, it reminds me of Plato's theory of forms. And Rupert Sheldrake says that his idea is more of an Aristotelian view, that everything is infused with intelligence, is evolving, rather than this consistent and infinite metaphysical realm of existence from Plato. So they're saying this is morphic resonance. We don't need a god for morphic resonance. We don't need all these things. It's something different. But as I said, it's the same thing. We're looking at the same thing through different points of perspective. So if you think of what we're talking about here, we're talking about this quote-unquote a non-material field, what would be the same to say this metaphysical field which organizes everything and which contains this intelligence which evolves through time. Some people may call this God. So here's saying, rather than there being some God, because as I said, as soon as you introduce the word God, people make this correlation with the Abrahamic religion, with this God of the Jews. And we're not talking about that. As I said, we need to evolve our conception of a God to not only include the Abrahamic idea, but God as a different concept. And I talk about the pantheism of Spinoza, and I talk about Einstein's God. I made that video. I'm going to link it somewhere on the screen, or you can find it below. We're talking about something different here, or he says, or something different than the Platonic realm of forms. So if there's no, so he's talking about evolution through time, and time and space are an illusion of our own perspective. If we think of a metaphysical realm of existence, or a metaphysical field which at its core time and space do not exist, if we talk about Plato's theory of forms, of this timeless metaphysical space, we're talking about the same thing. It doesn't, the idea of existing a morphic resonance and Plato's theory of forms, it doesn't contradict each other. Neither does it contradict some concept of something like a God. Some people may call it consciousness, some people may call it God, some people will call it Plato's theory of form, some people will call it morphic resonance. We are talking about the same thing, a non-physical and a physical realm of existence where the metaphysical precedes the latter one and everything resides in it. I really like the conclusion that the author gathers here. The advent of quantum mechanics and the turn of the century, and then the Big Bang theory in the 1960s, called into question the deterministic, mechanistic worldview, introducing spontaneity where once there was raw determinism, and the seething ocean of energy when once there was an empty void. So this idea that we're peeking into the world of the metaphysical, where there seems to be nothing. There's actually all these things going at the micro level, at the quantum level. Mindless matter was transformed into a cosmic system of fields and energy, as Einstein says. We have to think of matter as energy within a field rather than something else. In some sense, the story of the 20th century science has been one of its catching up with insights and realizations of ancient yoga and other traditions. I mentioned he talks about ancient yoga, but you can just translate, and then he mentions this right here, and other traditions, which is the same thing. We're talking about perennial ancient philosophies, which is something that I look into in the outline. So I would 100% agree with this. What we're seeing in the 20th century, as I've been mentioning, the last 3, 5, 10, 15, even 20 years, what we're seeing is that science is catching up with things that ancient philosophies used to talk about. So when he says about this matter and life is self-organizing from the level of the galaxy all the way to the cells and organism, and everything has this infinite intelligence, something that our ancient philosophers used to tell us. This is what morphic resonance, the theory from Rupert Sheldrake, is telling us, that there is these fields of, we call it energy, information, intelligence, that determine all what matter is. What is the intelligence behind matter? So what we used to read in ancient philosophies, we are are proving with science. Also, the idea of oneness, as I mentioned, and you have that quote from Erwin Schrödinger, which he says that oneness is something like that, a basic nature. I put it on the thumbnail on my previous videos. A basic nature of the universe. Quantum physics shows this oneness, this basic nature of the universe. So when you think about this oneness, about this non-local universe, and everything is connected, this is what ancient philosophies were telling us. We're living in an illusion. We're living on the bill of Maya, but behind the illusion, you can see that everything is together. Everything is Brahman at the end of the day. So this is what we're looking at in these theories. So entanglement is gone. There's two realities that can exist at the same time. There might be fields of information which go beyond what we thought was our physical nature, our material world. There's this information that is spread over everywhere. There seems to be this field of consciousness, this field of something that permeates everything and is cosmic system of fields and energy. And what we're seeing in the 20th century is catching up of this new science with the ancient philosophy. This is something that I'm doing in this channel. This new field theory, this morphic resonance, can explain everything from genetic inheritance to groupthink and Jung's collective unconscious. So everything is tying up together. As I said, this outline is going to be looking at these ancient philosophies and then putting the newer science together and putting some of the reports from multi states of consciousness together, which is something really new. And some people, well, this is anecdotal evidence. This is not really evidence, but at what point does it become some sort of evidence as that research and the scientific consensus for the future research of near-death experiences says? Hundreds of millions of reports saying the same thing, and this is only near-death experiences. Now, when you tie these near-death experiences with some of the other altered states of consciousness, as I mentioned, research on UFOs and abduction and psychedelics and out-of-body experiences, and you find the correlations between all of them, what the ancient science or ancient yogic tradition, as he called ancient philosophies and ancient yogic tradition, as he calls it here, and when you tie all of these with modern science and the reports, and you find similarities or themes, what I could like to call themes in all of them, we can get closer to a truth, to something resemblant of the true nature of who we are as human beings, what we're doing here, and perhaps what's going to be our future. If you're on the path of finding the truth about reality and our purpose as humans on Earth, the information that I have to share concerns you. After a lifetime of research in philosophies ranging from Buddhism to the occult, I've encountered themes and patterns along some baffling information that is beginning to be seriously studied by science. A Rational Divine Outline, The Ghost of Jesus, is the first iteration of this project, where I analyze the message of Jesus without dogmatism, fanaticism, or religious bias. You can find my work available on Amazon on the link below. If you find this work valuable, consider subscribing, sharing, and following me on social media, as it'll help others in the same path to find this information. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.